What's up, yo? Welcome to Your One Life. I'm your host, Kim Young Kim, and I'm really glad to have you as a listener today. Now, if you're new to this podcast, here's what it's all about. It's about teaching you from the greatest minds in the world, helping you in all aspects of your life, and showing you how to love yourself more by withholding love from everyone else. I'm pretty sure that's how love math works. Now, today's episode is about the book, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up by Marie Kondo. This is part 2 of the series. And I remember meeting a woman when I first picked up the book and telling her about me reading the book and getting on the journey. And she told me, "Oh, that's awesome. I did it myself. And it took me 2 months to do. But that's only because I wasn't working at the time." And when she told me that, I was saying to myself in my mind, she must have been totally slacking on getting this done. But now I realize that she was actually doing her best. And as I'm in the thick of it, I see why this takes some people up to 6 months to get it done. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and be honest and say, yes, I am done going through all my stuff. I finished up the last 3 categories of papers, Komono, which is a lot of different things, and sentimental items, but I have not done the organization part of this program yet. But the good news is it's supposed to be a lot easier than the discarding part. But I will tell you that there will be a part 3 episode to this series, and I'm still working on it myself. Now, you should have already listened to part 1 of this podcast series. If you haven't, stop right here, go back and listen to it, and come back to this episode. But if you've done that, and you've actually implemented the instruction, then your clothing and your books are done, and now all you have left is clothes that make you feel good and books that make you seem smart. Let's go. Now, with that being said, we're going to hop in the next category, which is papers. And what she says about papers is you need to go ahead and toss them all. And this is really extreme, and it shocks a lot of her clients when she says this. But what I will say is you should definitely toss papers that are incriminating, because what happens in Panama could send the IRS your way. But she gives some pretty extreme advice. And I actually agree with her on this stuff, but also there are some caveats to throwing out your papers. So one thing is, if you find papers that are letters from friends, past significant others, those can actually be saved for a later time when you do your sentimental items, which is the last thing that you do. Now, you might end up finding some embarrassing love letters, like a one President Ronald Reagan. Here's something directly quoted from one of his love letters to his wife. "Her name is Nancy, but for some time now, I've called her Mommy, and I don't believe I could change." If you've written anything like this, burn those letters immediately. These letters, which were actually written on their 20th anniversary of marriage, are just embarrassing. They are more shameful than the Iran-Contra scandal. Okay? So if you got anything like this, burn, baby, burn. So you don't put your country to shame. Now, coming back to actual papers that you'll find, all the bills that you have, all the pay slips, just throw those all away, put them in a pile to be shredded, because here's the deal. Everything is online. Credit card statements, your medical bills, all that stuff, once it's paid, and you know you have an online copy, you can just go ahead and get rid of them. Now, I do have a couple medical bills from an accident that happened that I've hung on to just because of the fact that I've heard of stories about people getting medical bills years down the road. But besides those, the regular ones that you get, what Marie Kondo says is pay them and then toss them. Also, warranties and manuals. She says manuals you can trash for the most part because you'll probably figure it out, or you'll take it to the store, or maybe there's a YouTube video or a tutorial on the company's website. And of course, use your good sense. If you need them to put something together or to construct something, then don't toss them. Also, warranties. She says warranties you'll probably never use, and you can probably toss these as well, but you can actually hang on to both, and I'll explain later how she says you can hang on to both in a very manageable way. Also, lecture notes, class or conference materials. She says go ahead and toss these as well, especially if the lecture was on the book The Secret or The Power of Positive Thinking, which those are essentially the same book. And for this one, I will admit that this one was hard. I did not follow through with all of it, but these things are not an all or nothing situation, and I'll explain more about that later on. Now, some other papers that I found that I actually decided to keep are old business plans and old life plans from like 10, 12 years ago. And the reason why I kept those is I think that stuff is valuable to see what still rings true, but it's not a lot of stuff that I actually kept. And here's the deal about these things. You don't have to be a Nazi about this stuff. And as I say this, I wonder to myself, do Nazis ever get offended when people use their name in this fashion? Are they like, whoa, wow, all right, okay, yeah, here we are getting a bad rep again. No idea. But anyways, when you are tossing your papers and organizing your papers, she says you need 3 categories of papers. Here are the 3 categories. Papers you're currently using, papers you need for a limited time, and papers you need for the long haul. Papers that you're currently using are papers that you need to deal with. These might be forms that you need to fill out. These may be bills where you got mischarged for something and you need to follow up. And you might even have a subpoena that you need to show up for or ignore. But as you have these papers you need to deal with, put them all in one part of the house, not scattered about. And I will go ahead and admit that I am actually terrible at this. And this is one of the reasons why I have so many papers that I need to deal with. So papers you need to deal with go in one place, and then you deal with them. I've heard someone say before, don't touch a paper more than once. And if you procrastinate on it, at least don't touch it more than twice. And what Marie Kondo says is your needs attention papers are never done. And she struggles with this as well, which is a nice reassuring thing to hear. But regardless, you got to take care of biz and do your best on them. All right, so another category is papers you need to save. These might include a birth certificate, an apartment or a car lease, the original copy of the Declaration of Independence with a treasure map or a terrible movie plot on the backside of it. These papers you need to save, and you need to put them in a place where you know where they are and they're always there and you can't lose them. Now, she breaks down papers that you need to keep for a time period into 2 categories. Those with infrequent uses such as warranties, insurance policies, so on and so forth. And she says these papers, what you can do is you can just grab one of those big plastic folders that open up like an envelope and just slide them all in there because you're not going to be looking at them very often. And you can fish them out when and if you need them. But with the papers that you need more frequently, she says, put them in a file folder or in those clear plastic sheet protectors. And she says if they're not worthy of a sheet, maybe they're not worthy to be kept. All right, so in summary, toss most of the papers that you find, have a stack of the ones that you're dealing with, and also organize the ones that you're keeping for the short term or the long term. All right, let me type that last section. You got a lot of papers, and I'm telling you right now, they're lighter than a feather, but still will weigh you down. So toss those papers and get them gone today, and feel a sense of order and no longer disarrayed. All right, moving on. Komono. Komono. What is kimono? Kimono in Japanese means many things, but one of the translations is insignificant person, small fry, and kimono is most of the stuff you own. And this is the hardest category by far. And it's a category that tripped me up the most in this journey as I was getting with the program, because most of your stuff is Komono. Now, here are some of the categories that she gives in the book: CDs and DVDs, skincare products, makeup, accessories, credit cards, passports, etc., hobby items, electrical equipment, household supplies, kitchen goods, and random items. Now, there's a bunch of subcategories within these categories themselves, and it's really important that you look at the whole list with all the subcategories to help you to understand. So I'll make sure to drop those in the show notes one way or another. But think about this for a second. Minus your clothes, your books, your papers, and your sentimental items, Komono is this massive, massive category that's probably bigger than all the rest when you put it all together. And one of the things she says is you need to store like things together, which will help you to categorize them. And it's very important that you do your Komono one category at a time. I thought that I could do multiple categories at a time as I was getting impatient with the process. And because of that, I suffered and it became a lot more work. So don't do that. Pick one category, get it done, and then you can move on to the next one. Also, as you're going through your stuff, visualize where you're going to put your Komono, what part of your house you're going to put it in. That's going to help out a lot. And it'll also help you to categorize things, because some things are hard to categorize because they don't fall into perfect categories. For example, I have a life-size Ryan Seacrest bobblehead. That doesn't fit in any particular category, and that's why this part is going to be kind of difficult. But if you think about where in your house you're going to put it, then you'll be set up to win. Now, as you go through all these categories, you're probably going to toss out at least half of the stuff that you have. And that is what we're supposed to do. Touch it. If it doesn't spark joy, you toss it. And that goes for gifts as well, right? If someone gives you a gift, do not keep it just because it was a gift from somebody. The gift giver gave joy in the moment that they gave it to you. And holding on to something just because someone gave it to you wouldn't make that person feel good about themselves if they learned that you were doing that. And that is really the opposite of generosity. Also, things like cosmetic samples. She says, go ahead and get rid of those. She says, go ahead and get rid of boxes that your electronics came in. And oh my gosh, I felt so convicted when I read this part, because I had this basement. It's a very unfinished basement. And so much of the stuff got unpacked there. And I just had all these random boxes there. But you don't need to keep boxes of pretty much anything. And she has this litmus test. She says, if you think about your house as a storage unit, would you hang on to a box if you are paying to have it stored? And of course, the answer to that is no. Also, with cords, if you don't know what a cord is for and you can't match it to anything, go ahead and just toss it out. And I will say the same thing with Tupperware. If you can't match Tupperware, then guess what? That needs to go to the recycling bin. Also, broken appliances. Oof, guilty as charged. I look at broken appliances and I say to myself, wow, maybe there's going to be some whiz out there who can fix this and use this. Or maybe I can use this in a prank where I'm walking around with a flat screen TV. I make eye contact with a cop. I drop it and then I break out running. But I know that neither of those are very realistic. And because of that, I just need to get rid of this TV. Also, health crazed products. She says, go ahead and get rid of those unless you're actively using them, especially if it's an ab roller. Because I say, who needs an ab roller when you got a rolling pin? Because with a rolling pin, you can flatten your abs and your cookie dough at the same dang time. Also, she says spare change. Put spare change into your wallet and just spend it. Don't collect spare change. Don't stockpile things. She found people who had like 60, 70 toothbrushes in their house. Like, nobody needs a bunch of stuff. And we're not in the middle of 2020 where people are hoarding paper towels and toilet paper. So guess what? You do not need to stockpile things. And you probably have a store nearby where you can get stuff. In regards to your kitchenware and all shared items, She says to do these categories last because you do not want to make unilateral decisions on things that you share with your family members, with your housemates, so on and so forth. And I will say, I am still salty about someone tossing my Darth Vader spatula. This is a true story. It was by far the coolest spatula I've ever had. And sometimes it pops up in my dreams. And I'm flipping pancakes with Darth Vader's head. So whoever tossed out my beloved kitchen utensil, shame on you. Shame, shame. All right, let me put a bow on that real quick. You got a lot of things to toss. Most the stuff you bought at Ross, you got nowhere to put it, and most of it is junk. So drop it off at Goodwill or send it to the dump. All right, moving on. Sentimental items. This is the last category, and it's the last category because it's the toughest category to do. One key tip she gives in the beginning of this section is your parents' house is not a haven for your mementos. And if you send your stuff to your parents' house, it'll never come back. And real talk, it's not a good thing to burden your parents with your stuff. Your stuff is your stuff. You got to take care of your business. And that's just my 2 cents. But I have seen people do this, and it's never a really good look. So what Marie Kondo says is what you're going to do is handle every sentimental item that you have. And as you do, you're going to process your past by handling each one of these items. And that's exactly what I did. I sat in a room with no music. I touched these items. I read through them. I looked at them. And it did help me process my past. And what she says is you may be living in the past by hanging on to these items. And if you're living in the past, you can't enjoy the present or plan your future. Now, you may also know somebody like this, but I have a friend who used to be an athlete at UCLA. And this friend still wears the UCLA colors and the garb like all the time. And this friend is always talking about the past and the glory days of being an athlete. It's literally all he talks about. And even though I understand where he's coming from, I feel like it's just really sad for him to do this. You know, that's like Beyonce walking around her house in a Destiny's Child shirt. Was Destiny's Child great? Yeah, they were. But did Beyonce have other things to do afterwards? Yes, she did. Now, I know you're sitting there and thinking, hey, Kim Young, I'm not Beyonce. And my answer to that statement is, yet. You're not Beyonce yet. Don't give up so easily on your dreams, people. Now, as we're talking about holding on to things, as I was going through all my stuff, did I find some notebooks and journals that I didn't toss and I put in a box in my basement? Maybe. Do they have embarrassing letters in them that I wrote to Nancy Reagan? I'll just say, that's going to be a mystery, Mr. T. But I did toss a good few of the journals and notebooks that I found. And here's the deal. With this program, you can cheat a little bit. I mean, you shouldn't. But if you cannot bring yourself to throw something away, you can cheat a little bit. And being 95% compliant is still an A in my book. Now, as you come across letters, she says the only ones you keep are the ones that you're going to read over and over. And I read through most of the letters that I found and most of the cards that I found, and I only kept like 3 or 4 of them. But going through each one did help me to process my past. In regards to gifts that you've been given, even if someone made a gift for you, maybe your kids made a gift for you, maybe someone else made a gift for you, if it does not spark joy, it's got to go. Now, one of the last things she talks about is photos. She says go through photos last because they're the hardest to part with. But at this point, you have developed a very good skill of tossing things and you have gained a really good intuition on what to keep. And remember, this is not focusing on how much you're going to throw away. It's focusing on what you're going to keep. Now, as I went through my photos, I found photos from college. I found photos from my studies abroad, travels, old communities I was a part of. And a lot of the people in these photos, if I saw them today, I would absolutely give them a hug. I would absolutely be happy to see them. But also, I haven't had contact with any of these people minus one or two for over a decade. So even though they were important to me at one time, they were in my life for a season. And that's not a bad thing. That's just life. So what I ended up doing is I actually tossed about 95% of the photos that I found. And I have probably about 24, 25 photos out of hundreds. And what she says is don't put them in boxes, put them in albums. And what she says is if you won't take the time to put them in a photo album or to display them, maybe they're not something you should hang on to. Now, I will throw in one caveat. Do not toss incriminating photos. If you have a photo of a friend of yours flicking the bird with one hand and holding up $37 cash with the other, hang on to that. That's super valuable blackmail material. Now, as you're going through your stuff, you might find a box full of stuff that isn't even yours. You might find a box that's been passed along throughout the years. I heard about somebody who had boxes from their great-grandparents and, photos and all these things of all these people they never actually met in their life, a report card from 1932. And they don't want to throw these boxes away because they're so old and it feels terrible for them to throw them out. But they know that they're going to pass them along to their kids. And then it's going to be this whole cycle of boxes of stuff that have no sentimental value. And if that's the case, why would you keep them? So if you come across a watch that's a family heirloom, yes, keep that. But if you come across a Great Depression coloring book with the Dust Bowl on the cover, no, toss that. Or put it up on eBay and see what you can get. Now, in the previous episode, I talked about a click point that everybody has where you have just the right amount of stuff. And she actually says, if you're a shoe person and you have 100 pair of shoes, guess what? That could actually be your click point. If you're a bibliophile and you have hundreds of books, then that might actually be your click point. But the key is, and you already know what's coming, do these items spark joy? That is your litmus test of keeping them or giving them a new home or tossing them out. All right, let me wrap that up real quick. Yo, I'm talking about items that are quite sentimental, and that's what I'm saying. Yo, I just send those things to my parents. No, I keep them for myself, and yo, I'll come through, and my past is dealt. And that's what I'm saying. I got to live in the now. I got to live in the future. And that's what I do. I got to just process everything that I went through. And that's what I do. Yo, it's just true. I come through and I go through letters and gifts. And that's what I do. I constantly lift those on up and ask, do they spark joy? And that's what I'm saying. No, I don't start noise, but I'm going through the photos just to see how my past just shaped me and talk about old things that you've been passed on to. And that's what I do. That ain't even strong do to give it to the next of kin. Yo, I'm just blessing them by throwing it out. No freaking doubt. And I'm talking about a click point that you got. We all just got one. And yo, I'm just dropping a whole bunch of things that don't spark joy. And that's why I'm saying make some noise about this thing called Marie Kondo, Kondo Marie. And that's what we see coming out the top. And that's how it go. Freestyle flow and let it all go. All right, so that's the end of the episode. Part 2 of the life-changing magic of tidying up by Marie Kondo. You are now equipped to go through your stuff, to figure out what you're going to keep and discard the rest. Now, like I said previously, it'd be a good idea for you to take a look at the list that I'm going to share in the show notes, just so you get clarity on how to organize and separate all your Komono items. Also, as I said in the last episode on the Marie Kondo method, come back to this episode as you're going through the steps so you can walk through it step by step, because it's easy to forget this stuff over time. And I also highly recommend that you watch videos that Marie Kondo has put up on YouTube. You watch the Netflix series on this for inspiration and a little more guidance. And when in doubt, search the internet and see if other people can give insight when you get stuck on categories or when you feel lost on this. And real talk, it would be super helpful if you read the book or listened to the audiobook. the life-changing magic of tidying up. All right, so I'll have a part 3 episode where I've fully gone through the process, and that is coming your way. But first, I have to go through the process. So in the meantime, start working on your papers, your kimono, and your sentimental items, which will keep you nice and busy. If you're new to this podcast, please hit the follow button so you don't miss future episodes. And if you've been listening, please rate and review the podcast. That helps a lot with getting the word out. And if you think of anybody who needs to hear this message, please forward it to them. Shout out to my dude Siraj for making the instrumental for this podcast, and shout out to you for all the great things you're going to do with the teachings you learn on the KonMarie Method to get your house in order. This is Your One Life. I'm Kim Young Kim. I hope you have a great day, a great week, and until next time, peace!